When we separated, we both were mature enough to realize that we couldn't be parents that treated our kid like a pawn. We didn't want our daughter to feel like it was her fault or that she did something wrong or that she was in the wrong because of one thing or another because we were fighting about things.
Hello, everyone. This is Ekaterina with Trust Me Mom. And my guest today is Jason Cercone, who is a podcaster, a strategist, and a father. And everybody heard about the term long distance relationship. But what about long distance parenting? So Jason will share his story, how he is navigating distance by co-parenting with his former wife and taking care of his daughter. So it will be an interesting story, and I'm sure a lot of our audience members can relate to it as well. Jason, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Gonna have a lot of fun today.
Well, tell us your story.
Well, do you want the personal story, the professional story, or a blend of both?
Blend of both.
So I've been here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania since I moved down here in 2000. My now ex-wife moved down here a couple years later, got married, had our daughter McKenna, and then very shortly after that we got separated. And from there, it's been, on the professional side of things, I've tried many different pursuits. I've been in podcasting now for over 10 years. That was really where I landed and found this is my space. These are my people. This is where I really want to try to excel. And over that time span, have learned a lot about pretty much every aspect I can. I try to just absorb anything in regards to podcasting to help my clients, help myself, and basically help the industry be better. So over the last couple of years, I've been developing my company, Bomb Track Media, focusing on working with businesses and helping them leverage podcasting in a powerful way for them, making it more specific to their brand goals and finding out the best way to move forward in that versus just saying, you should start a podcast and let's roll with it and see what happens. Like, no, we need to put strategy in mind. So that's really where my attention's been in regards to my business. In regards to raising my daughter, she was very close to me after my ex and I had separated. She was only living a mile away. So it was very easy to co-parent. And one of the big things I will say that I think really added a good layer and a very good dynamic to my and my ex's relationship. When we separated, we both were mature enough to realize that we couldn't be parents that treated our kids like a pawn or our kid like a pawn. We didn't want our daughter to feel like it was her fault or that she did something wrong or that she was in the wrong because of one thing or another because we were fighting about things. Like, no, I didn't. I'd seen that. I didn't want to be that parent. And my ex was also very understanding. And she said, yeah, same thing. So we were very much on the same page with that. And that's allowed us to enter into this co-parenting space in a much more mature fashion. And ultimately, it's helped us raise our daughter to be a very wonderful young lady. And of course, hiccups along the way, that's going to happen. That's unavoidable. But overall, I feel the fact that we've been able to be very understanding and compromising with one another, with our schedules, with things we want to do with our daughter, it's made all the difference. So in a nutshell, that's the story.
So
I'm sorry. To add to, I should say this, 2 years ago, they moved from that mile away to 6 hours away. So that is what brings us together today to talk about the long distance side of parenting, which was a new challenge for us to navigate, at least for me to navigate. But I know we're going to talk about that more. So now We're up to speed. Now we're good.
Perfect. So how often do you see your daughter? How do you plan meetings and keep in touch?
It's a very interesting question because right now I feel like I'm a little bit spoiled. When my ex-wife and daughter moved, they had yet to sell the house they were living in. So they had moved in with her fiance and a great guy that I get along with, and he's doing a phenomenal job in the stepdad role. And I feel like they come back now a little bit more frequently because now they're in the final stages of selling the house. Actually, as we sit and record, this coming weekend is the last weekend. Like they closed, everything's going to be done. So now will be I'll learn how much more I'll see her. And I feel like now it's going to be a little bit more on me to make some trips down to Virginia versus waiting for them to come up here because they needed to, because they were
Mhm.
doing things with the house. And then I would get to spend time with my daughter then. And they were here over the summer for various activities. I got to see her a lot then. So now, probably more than what's about to happen. So we'll see how that unfolds. You'll have to bring me back maybe in a year. We'll talk about how that how that all unfolded. But I do know now it's going to require a little bit more effort on my part to make a couple extra road trips.
And I'm sure a lot of people are in a similar situation where unfortunately they go through divorce or certain life circumstances where they don't get to see their children very often anymore. So,
Yeah.
how do you keep in touch with your daughter? Do you have any special, maybe, communication strategies?
Constant texting. I could just last night we were having a great text conversation, and that's something I try to do as much as possible just to keep the lines open. And she's 15 right now. So I remember how I was when I was that age. It wasn't like my top priority was making sure I'm talking to mom and dad every day. I mean, my parents, we all lived together, so of course I talked to them in that respect, but also texting and those things didn't exist when I was that age. So texting's a very big part of it, and I know that she's just a text away. If I want to say hi or tell her I love her, tell her how awesome she is, whatever I can do to add some positivity to her day, I try to do that. We have a weekly FaceTime call on our schedule. I wish, and even she says this. We sometimes we'll slide and miss, and we missed last week. We better get on the phone this week, and we'll talk a little longer, or whatever it may be. Because we always, I think we realize that our relationship, when we are together or when we do connect, we have great conversations. I think and that was always, I could pull out a little bit of the podcaster in me. And I always said that when she was coming up, when she was young, maybe 7, 8 years old, the typical response you get from a kid. How was school? Fine. And I was, the podcaster in me couldn't just let it lay with one word. I'm like, tell me what was fine about it. Oh, it was all right. Well, tell me one good thing that happened. As I would keep peeling that onion and keep digging. But I think as she got older, she appreciated that because it opens up the conversation lines a little bit more, and she feels more comfortable telling stories and getting into more detail with me. So there are nights that when she's visiting, we'll sit at the dining room table and just talk for hours. And we were actually talking about that last night in our text conversation, that I told her how much I enjoy that. And she says, I love anytime we get to talk, but those are my favorite times too, when we're sitting at the table just talking about anything. So even though the time together physically is way different, we still have that connection and maintain it because we're both trying to do so. And I think that's really the most important part. You have to put effort into it. It won't just happen, especially with a teenager. I'm learning that, because there are still times when I'll text her and won't hear anything back. And she's like, I'm sorry, I was doing this with my boyfriend, or I was doing that, or whatever. It's okay. I want her to live her life. I don't want her to feel like she has to reach back out to me immediately. But it's also nice to know that we can still have that type of relationship, even though we're not in the same household.
Yes. And it's so nice to hear that you still maintain that closeness in the relationship. It's often expected that fathers will protect their daughters.
Yes.
And being far could be challenging. So, do you have any tips, strategies? Let's say she now has a boyfriend or goes to a party. Do you have any thoughts how you can keep her safe when you're far away?
It's a lot of times that mindset is more on the physical side of things, how the fathers are going to react to the boyfriends and whatnot. But I think that just keeping the communication lines open to talk is where the long distance part can still come into play, because sometimes it can just be a piece of advice that she's looking for. If you're trying to, what's the word, helicopter from a distance, I don't think that can work. And
Hmm.
I won't do it. So I won't know, because again, I feel my parents, yes, we all lived together. They're still together to this day. We had the freedom to learn and make mistakes. And if we made big mistakes, we were punished for them. But my parents didn't put this big, like, you can't go do this because this might happen. It's like, no, you need to go out in the world and see what it's like and see what happens. And I want her to feel that way as well. In that, there's always going to be in the back of my mind, how am I going to protect her even though I'm way up here? And as I said before, fortunately, my ex's fiance, his name's Brian, the stepdad role is very well filled. He's a good guy, and I know he has her best interests at heart as well. And him and I have had conversations about what are we doing here in this case. And I know there was one with an ex-boyfriend where he stepped in and played a role that I would have loved to have played had I been there. But it was nice to know that he was able to say something that this little boy needed to hear. So that's a big part of it. I think to put an overarching answer to your question, it's all in the communication, and everybody's got to be willing to have those conversations. And it can't be that jealousy or those things that a lot of co-parents might feel like, oh, you're filling this role and that's my role. Like, no, you have to be real about it. And if that person has your child's best interest at heart, you have to let them play that role. And just like when you're with them or when they're with you and they're not in the picture directly, they're going to expect the same of you. Like, you're back in the role right in that moment. So there's a lot to consider, but I think strong communication amongst all the parties is really going to make the difference.
Yes, wise words. What about your personal feelings? So, for example, everything you described sounds so mature and wonderful, and it sounds that there's a great new family that is helping out the stepdad. But I'm sure it was really hard for you to be far away from your child. So,
Sure.
how did you cope with your own emotions and thoughts?
Believe me, that was not easy. Again, that was one of the biggest fears. However, this is what I did, and I can't say that this is how it's going to work for everybody, but this was my personal situation. I knew that as the relationship that my ex was developing with her now fiance was growing, he works for the government. He's down there. I knew that when he was not, there's a reason for him to quit his job and come here. So in my mind, I knew eventually this is going to be something I have to deal with. If I can start mentally preparing myself for the reality of my daughter not living down the street anymore, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be easier to start the adaptation process. I'm very fortunate in my life. My dad has taught me about adapting a lot through life. There are things that happen that you're just not expecting. My mom had a stroke back in 2010, changed everything. His whole life changed in regards to how he had to care for her. And now, as we're 16 years later or 15 years later, that continues to be things he has to adapt to. But he's so strong in doing that. I learned a ton watching how he adapts, and that's taught me how to do it too. So I've learned to do that in my life, personally and professionally. So again, can everybody have that type of roadmap? Not exactly, because sometimes, unfortunately, a parent might just be like, oh, by the way, I'm moving 6-7 hours away or across the country or whatever the case may be. Oh, and I'm taking our kid with us. And now you have to figure out how to navigate that road. And oftentimes that can lead to major custody battles and things that just are ugly. But I knew that, for one, I knew my daughter would want to be with her mom, and I'm never going to be. I guess that's the old school Italian in me. I take from The Sopranos, like, you separate a child from his mother? No. Or from her mother? No, not happening. But at the same time, I knew that, as I said before, and I think I can't remember if I mentioned this before we turned on the mics or after, she was having a couple bully issues at her school. It sucked. It was rough to see her go through that, and I think anything bully wise is just crazy, and to see your own kid go through it was not fun. And in my mind, my thought was going to a new school gives her a clean slate. She gets to meet new friends. It's a new area. Let's see what happens. And that's really what she got into the new school. She started meeting some new people. Not everything has been a smooth paved road. There's been a couple hiccups along the way, but I think that's life. And that's what I try to tell her. These are the things that make you stronger. The more you can learn from these situations, understand that you're trying to be the good person despite what someone else might be doing, that's going to help you be a stronger, more well-rounded person as you continue to grow and evolve. So I'll tell you, I look at all of that and still feel like I can play a role, and that helps me with my own personal feelings. If I was cut off from everything and had no communication, I know I would feel way differently. But knowing that she's in a better place And that this chapter, and this is the way I talked about it with her, because she didn't want to leave me. I know that was a big thing she had told me. I said, think about this. You're going into high school. This is a 4-year chapter for you. After you graduate, you're going to be 18. Go where you want. If you want to come back to Pittsburgh, come back to Pittsburgh. Maybe I won't be here by then, and you come where I'm at then. Like, there's going to be so many things that you're going to have at your disposal as long as you focus on doing things right, getting good grades, being a good person, building up your self-esteem, and just being this person that's going to make a difference in the world. These are all things that are presentable to you. You just got to get out and grab it, and don't look at this as a loss, look at it as a gain. And then when this chapter closes, you figure out what comes next. So all that combined, maybe it's a coping mechanism for me, but overall, I also think it's sound advice to help anybody try to navigate these types of uncharted waters.
That's really great. Yes, I agree with that. What about, so you mentioned bullying. Are you teaching her how to stand up for herself?
Yes. And it's one of those things, I think it's, you go back to the old school Italian advice, don't hit them first. There's been a couple times, because my daughter's tall. She's already taller than me. If she wanted to thump some of these clowns, she could. But we're not teaching her to fight. But it's very, I think it's so different now from what I experienced, because of all the information that kids are bombarded with, and technology is just in their face. And us as rational adults have trouble consuming all of that information. We just don't have the attention spans for it. And now a kid whose brain hasn't fully developed yet is also getting the same type of treatment. There's so many messages being thrown their way. I could understand why so many of them are confused. And I think in a lot of that drives the bullying culture. And what I think adds another layer to it is kids can hide behind their keyboards and bully just as easily, if not more easily, than they would if they were in front of somebody. And I've tried to prepare her for that. My biggest thing with my daughter has always been trying to be real about the world. I don't feel there's any benefit to sugarcoating things and making her feel like there isn't some crap that's going to happen as she gets older. We all experience it, but it's all in how you learn from failures and go into it understanding that even if you do fail, it's okay. It's going to teach you a lesson so you're stronger and wiser the next time you swing. That's how I've always tried to live my life, and I want her to do the same. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to try to reach out to new people and have conversations. I think one of the biggest lessons that I taught her, that she told me, it was one of those things where, it's your dad's telling you this, like, whatever, dad, that's never going to work. But it was about taking the high road. And she was having this situation with a friend that was no longer a friend at school. And she told me things she wanted to say and things she wanted to do. And again, all completely justified based on what this girl had done. But I told her to instead try ignoring it and try just talking, to say what you need to say, but don't try to escalate the situation. The high road is free of potholes. And if you can live there, it's going to be a much smoother ride. That's a little dadism I came up with on the spot when I was talking to her. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, that wasn't bad. But it made her realize that once she got into that situation, she could see that the person was not getting a rise out of her, and therefore started to de-escalate all of the crap herself. And as hard as it was for her to understand that eventually this all will pass, because, with kids and the short attention spans, even adults with the short attention spans, things come and things go. You're going to feel much better about yourself if you don't get down in the mud with these people. You stay up here. If you have something to say it, but be very direct and stick to what you believe in. But don't try to pick fights and add to the fights and just let them know that they're getting you. If they're getting in your head and they see it, they're going to stay there and they're going to keep giving you nonsense, and you're going to have to try to live with that. But if you're showing that you're strong and you can stay above where they're trying to get you to come down to their level, stay above that, you're going to be in a much better spot. So once she tried it and got a little more comfortable with acting that way, that person pretty much just backed off, and now there's really no contact there anymore, but there's no more bullying either. And that changed everything. And that was one of those things. I tried it. You were right. Like again, I've always said there's so many things I remember my dad telling me as I was growing up, and even as I've been an adult, that I'm just like, yeah, all right. But then eventually it proves to be true. I'm like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. I've always wanted to be that source of help and information for my daughter too. So it's nice to know, even if it's little things, small victories count just as much.
Oh, yes, of course. Any other interesting Italian wisdom that you can remember from
Hmm.
growing up that you're passing to your daughter?
Yeah. I let me think. I think a lot of it was, for me, growing up, it was not a strict household, but we were expected to do our part and carry our weight. And I remember my sister and I we had our chores and things had to be done on a daily basis. It taught us work ethic. And that's one of the big things I've always looked back on with my parents. And they've taught me so much, but one of the biggest things was work ethic. And I've tried to instill that as much as possible with her, not trying to get a free ride, understanding that the most fruitful results come from hard work. And it feels so much better knowing how much effort you put into something. When you see the fruits of your labor come to be, it's so much more rewarding. It's simple things like that, and that even stems from my grandfather. That's what he taught my dad. And there's, gosh, I could probably go a number of different ways with that, but I think work ethic is probably something that the Italian culture has been prided on for many years. Think of the immigrants that came to America and what they had to do to get by in those very early beginnings. I think that speaks very strongly to the work ethic, and that's something I try to stick to every day, making sure that I'm doing my part to build my business, take care of my clients, and take care of my family at the same time. It all works together for me. So if she can come out with a little bit of that type of knowledge and ethic in mind, then I know I've done something right. And her mother tries to instill the same type of work ethic in her too. So that's hopefully going to be a big win for us down the road.
That's so good to hear. So, as we wrap up our conversation, do you have any specific, maybe keywords, strategies, something? I know some parents may say, they can pre-record a message for their child if they're going to a party and they're in danger, or um, there are certain ideas where you give a hint to your child that if they're in an unsafe situation, how they can reach out to you, or that they can always come to you no matter what happened to them. So do you have something like that with your daughter?
I don't, but I think that's a great system, especially with technology being what it is, having a keyword or a certain emoji that you send, just so it lights the lamp, like the bat signal. Okay, there's something that we need to be paying attention to here. I think that's a great way to parent, and I'm not even just parent. I think amongst couples as well, because you never know. It's dangerous out there. Something might happen. It's good to have that type of backup. I will say, I mean, again, I think she's 15. I think I told you before we started, she's about to turn 16. So there's going to be things that are going to start, the next chapter in parenting, driving, parties. Boys have already kind of been in the picture to some degree, just, whatever kids do as freshmen in high school dating. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of new waters to navigate. I think from my end, yeah, I think those, having those types of systems in place are great. I think the biggest message that I can give to any person in a co-parenting situation is communication has to be strong. It has to be out there. It has to be in play, and you have to be willing to compromise at times. There's going to be times where you don't get what you want, but you have to understand that it will all come full circle. Eventually, that's going to balance out. You're going to need a solid, and the other parent can help you out. So there's plenty of advice that could really keep our conversation going for hours, but it starts with communication. I think if you can establish those lines with everyone involved in the situation, it makes for a much easier ride. And if you're trying to constantly all tug in different directions, who feels that the most? The child. And that's no way for them to live life because they didn't ask for any of that.
Yes, wise words. Well, thank you so much, Jason. It was a pleasure to learn more about your story and how you were able to build a really harmonious relationship with your daughter and her, the other part of the family.
Yeah, I appreciate the stage to tell this story. I usually am on podcasts talking about podcasting, so this was a breath of fresh air to get to talk about another part of my life. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.